is comparing the results across your experiments. So, and training time. Now, we've done it in a way where we've got 3 dictionaries here of our Model 0 results, Model 1 results, Model 2 results. So how about we create a data frame comparing them? So let's import pandas as PD, and we're going to compare results equals pd.dataframe. And because our model results dictionaries all have the same keys, let's pass them in as a list. So Model 0 results, Model 1 results, and Model 2 results to compare them. Wonderful. And what it looks like when we compare the results. Alrighty, so recall our first model was our baseline V0, it was just 2 linear layers. And so we have an accuracy of 83.4 and a loss of 0.47. The next model was we trained on the GPU and we introduced nonlinearities. So we actually found that that was worse off than our baseline. Then we brought in the big guns. We brought in the TinyVGG architecture from the CNN Explainer website and trained our first convolutional neural network. And we got the best results so far. But there's a lot more experiments that we could do. We could go back through our TinyVGG and we could increase the number of hidden units. Where do we create our model? Up here. We could increase this to say 30 and see what happens. That would be a good experiment to try. And if we found that nonlinearities didn't help with our second model, we could comment out the ReLU layers. We could, of course, change the kernel size, change the padding, change the max pool, a whole bunch of different things that we could try here. We could train it for longer. So maybe if we trained it for 10 epochs, it would perform better. But these are just things to keep in mind and try out. I'd encourage you to give them a go yourself. But for now, we've kept all our experiments quite the same. How about we see the results we add in the training time, because that's another important thing that we've been tracking as well. So we'll add training time to results comparison. So the reason why we do this is because if this model is performing quite well, even compared to our CNN, so a difference in about 5% accuracy, maybe that's tolerable in the space that we're working. Except that this model might actually train and perform inference 10 times faster than this model. So that's just something to be aware of. It's called the performance speed trade-off. So let's add another column here. Compare results, and we're going to add in, oh, excuse me, got a little error there, that's all right. Got trigger happy on the shift and enter. Training time equals, we're going to add in, we've got another list here, is going to be total train time for Model 0, and total train time for Model 1, and total train time for Model 2. And then we have a look at our compare results dictionary, compare results data frame. Wonderful. So we see, and now this is another thing, I keep stressing this to keep in mind, if your numbers aren't exactly what I've got here, don't worry too much. Go back through the code and see if you've set up the random seeds correctly. You might need a CUDA random seed. We may have missed one of those. If your numbers are outlandishly different to these numbers, then you should go back through your code and see if there's something wrong. And again, the training time will be highly dependent on the compute environment you're using. So if you're running this notebook locally, you might get faster training times. If you're running it on a different GPU to what I have, NVIDIA SMI, you might get different training times. So I'm using a Tesla P100, which is quite a fast GPU, but that's because I'm paying for Colab Pro, which generally gives you faster GPUs. And Model 0 was trained on the CPU, so depending on what compute resource Google allocates to you with Google Colab, this number might vary here. So just keep that in mind. These values, training time, will be very dependent on the hardware you're using. But if your numbers are dramatically different, well, then you might want to change something in your code and see what's going on. And how about we finish this off with a graph? So let's go visualize our model results. And while we're doing this, have a look at the data frame above. Is the performance here, 10 seconds longer training time, worth that extra 5% of the results on the accuracy? Now, in our case, we're using a relatively toy problem. What I mean by toy problem is quite a simple data set to try and test this out. But in your practice, that may be worth doing if your model takes longer to train, but gets quite a bit better performance. It really depends on the problem you're working with. Compare results, and we're going to set the index as the model name, because I think that's what we want our graph to be. We want the model name, and then we're going to plot, we want to compare the model accuracies, and we want to plot the kind is going to be equal to bar H, horizontal bar chart. We'll go P X label, we're going to get accuracy as a percentage, and then we're going to go P Y label. This is just something that you could share if someone was asking, how did your modeling experiments go on Fashion MNIST? Well, here's what I've got. And then they ask you, well, what's the Fashion MNIST Model V2? Well, you could say that's a convolutional neural network that replicates the CNN Explainer website that trained on a GPU. I go, how long did that take to train? Well, then you've got the training time here. We could just do it as a vertical bar chart. I did it as horizontal so that this looks a bit funny to me. So horizontal like that. So the model names are over here. Wonderful. So now I feel like we've got a trained model. How about we make some visual predictions? Because we've just got numbers on a page here, but our model is trained on computer vision data. And the whole point of making a machine learning model on computer vision data is to be able to visualize predictions. So let's give that a shot, hey? In the next video, we're going to use our best performing model, Fashion MNIST Model V2, to make predictions on random samples from the test dataset. You might want to give that a shot. Make some predictions on random samples from the test dataset and plot them out with their predictions as the title. So try that out. Otherwise, we'll do it together in the next video. In the last video, we compared our model's results. We tried 3 experiments. One was a basic linear model, one was a linear model with nonlinear activations, and Fashion MNIST Model V2 is a convolutional neural network. And we saw that from an accuracy perspective, our convolutional neural network performed the best. However, it had the longest training time. And I just want to exemplify the fact that the training time will vary depending on the hardware that you run on. We spoke about this in the last video. However, I took a break after finishing the last video, reran all of the cells that we've written, all of the code cells up here, by coming back to the notebook and going run all. And as you'll see, if you compare the training times here to the last video, we get some different values. Now, I'm not sure exactly what hardware Google Colab is using behind the scenes, but this is just something to keep in mind. At least from now on, we know how to track our different variables, such as how long our model takes to train and what its performance values are. But it's time to get visual, so let's create another heading. Make and evaluate. This is one of my favorite steps after training a machine learning model. So make and evaluate random predictions with the best model. So we're going to follow the Data Explorer's motto of getting visual, or visualize, visualize, visualize. Let's make a function called make predictions. And it's going to take a model, which will be a torch_nn.module type. It's also going to take some data, which can be a list. It'll also take a device type, which will be torch.device, and we'll set that by default to equal the default device that we've already set up. And so what we're going to do is create an empty list for prediction probabilities, because what we'd like to do is just take random samples from the test data set, make predictions on them using our model, and then plot those predictions. We want to visualize them. And so we'll also turn our model into evaluation mode, because if you're making predictions with your model, you should turn on evaluation mode. We'll also switch on the inference mode context manager, because predictions is another word for inference. And we're going to loop through for each sample in data. Let's prepare the sample. So this is going to take in a single image. So we will unsqueeze it because we need to add a batch size dimension on the sample. We'll set dim equals to 0, and then we'll pass that to the device. So add a batch dimension, that's with the unsqueeze, and pass to target device. That way, our data and model are on the same device, and we can do a forward pass. Or we could actually up here go model.toDevice. That way we know that we've got device agnostic code there. Now let's do the forward pass. Forward pass, model outputs raw logits. So recall that if we have a linear layer at the end of our model, it outputs raw logits. So pred logit for a single sample is going to equal model. We pass the sample to our target model, and then we're going to get the prediction probability. How do we get the prediction probability? So we want to go from logit to prediction probability. Well, if we're working with a multi-class classification problem, we're going to use the softmax activation function on our pred logit, and we're going to squeeze it so it gets rid of an extra dimension, and we're going to pass in dim equals 0. So that's going to give us our prediction probability for a given sample. Now, let's also turn our prediction probabilities into prediction labels. So get pred Well, actually, I think we're just going to return the pred probs. Yeah, let's see what that looks like, because we've got an empty list up here for pred probs. So for matplotlib, we're going to have to use our data on the CPU. So let's make sure it's on the CPU, because matplotlib doesn't work with the GPU. So get pred prob off GPU for further calculations. So we'll just hard code it in here to make sure that our prediction probability is off the GPU. So pred probs, which is our list up here, we're going to append the pred prob that we just calculated, but we're going to put it on the CPU. And then let's go down here, and we're going to, so if we've done it right, we're going to have a list of prediction probabilities relating to particular samples. So we're going to stack the pred probs to turn list into a tensor. So this is only one way of doing things. There are many different ways that you could make predictions and visualize them. I'm just exemplifying one way. So we're going to torch stack, which is just going to say, hey, concatenate everything in the list to a single tensor. So, oh, we might need to tab that over. Tab, tab. Beautiful. So let's try this function in action and see what happens. I'm going to import random, and then I'm going to set the random seed to 42. And then I'm going to create test samples as an empty list because we want a list of test samples to iterate through. And I'm going to create test labels also as an empty list so that, remember, when we are evaluating predictions, we want to compare them to the ground truth. So we want to get some test samples, and then we want to get their actual labels so that when our model makes predictions, we can compare them to their actual labels. So for sample, comma label, we're going to use random to sample the test data. Now note that this is not the test data loader. This is just test data. And we're going to set k equals to 9. And recall, if you want to have a look at test data, what do we do here? We can just go test data, which is our data set, not converted into a data loader yet. And then if we wanted to get the first 10 samples, can we do that? Only one element tensors can be converted into Python scalars. So if we get the first 0, then maybe we can go up to 10. Yeah, there we go. And what's the shape of this? Tuple has no object shape. Ah, okay. So we need to go image label equals that. And then can we check the shape of the image? Label. Oh, because the labels are going to be integers. Wonderful. So that's not the first 10 samples, but that's just what we get if we iterate through the test data. We get an image tensor, and we get an associated label. So that's what we're doing with this line here. We're just randomly sampling 9 samples, and this could be any number. You want. I'm going to use 9 because this is a spoiler for later on. We're going to create a 3x3 plot. So that's just 9 is just a fun number. So get some random samples from the test data set, and then we can go test samples.append sample, and we will go test labels.append label. And then let's go down here, view the first, maybe we go first sample shape. So test samples 0.shape. And then if we get test samples 0, we're going to get a tensor of image values. And then if we wanted to plot that, can we go plt imshow cmap equals gray, and we may have to squeeze this, I believe, to remove the batch tensor. Let's see what happens. Batch dimension. There we go. Beautiful. So that's to me a shoe. High heel shoe of some sort. If we get the title, plt.title, test labels, let's see what this looks like. It's a 5, which is, of course, class names. We will index on that. Sandal. Okay, beautiful. So we have 9 random samples, 9 labels that are associated with that sample. Now let's make some predictions. So make predictions. And this is one of my favorite things to do. I can't stress it enough, is to randomly pick data sample. From the test data set and predict on them and do it over and over and over again to see what the model is doing. So not only at the start of a problem, I'll just get the prediction probabilities here. We're going to call our make predictions function. So not only at the start of a problem should you become one with the data, even after you've trained a model, you'll want to further become one with the data, but this time become one with your model's predictions on the data and see what happens. So view the first 2 prediction probabilities list. So we're just using our make predictions function that we created before, passing it the model, the train model 2, and we're passing it the data, which is the test samples, which is this list that we just created up here, which is comprised of random samples from the test data set. Wonderful. So let's go pred probs. Oh, we don't want to view them all. That's going to give us Oh, we want 2. The prediction probabilities for a given sample. And so how do we convert prediction probabilities into labels? Because if we have a look at test labels, if we're trying to compare apples to apples, when we're evaluating our model, we can't really necessarily compare the prediction probabilities straight to the test labels. So we need to convert these prediction probabilities into prediction labels. So how can we do that? Well, we can use argmax to take whichever value here, the index, in this case this one, the index of whichever value is the highest of these prediction probabilities. So let's see that in action. Convert prediction probabilities to labels. So we'll go pred classes. Our model prediction probability 1, which is this list that we just created up here. First, we have course class. Because the labels are going to be integers. lt.title, no date, train. Oh, we don't want to view them all. That's going to give us, oh, we want 2. The prediction probabilities for a given sample. And so how do we convert prediction probabilities into labels? Because if we have a look at test labels, if we're trying to compare apples to apples, when we're evaluating our model, we can't really necessarily compare the prediction probabilities straight to the test labels. So we need to convert these prediction probabilities into prediction labels. So how can we do that? Well, we can use argmax to take whichever value here, the index, in this case this one, the index of whichever value is the highest of these prediction probabilities. So let's see that in action. Convert prediction probabilities to labels. So we'll go pred classes equals pred probs, and we'll get the argmax across the first dimension. And now let's have a look at the pred classes. Wonderful. So are they in the same format as our test labels? Yes, they are. So if you'd like to go ahead, in the next video, we're going to plot these and compare them. So we're going to write some code to create a matplotlib plotting function that's going to plot 9 different samples along with their original labels and their predicted label. So give that a shot. We've just written some code here to make some predictions on random samples. If you'd like them to be truly random, you can comment out the seed here, but I've just kept the seed at 42 so that our random.sample selects the same samples on your end and on my end. So in the next video, let's plot these. Let's now continue following the Data Explorer's motto of visualize, visualize, visualize. We have some prediction classes. We have some labels we'd like to compare them to. You can compare them visually. It looks like our model is doing pretty good. But since we're making predictions on images, let's plot those images along with the predictions. So I'm going to write some code here to plot the predictions. I'm going to create a matplotlib figure. I'm going to set the fig size to 9 and 9 because we've got 9 random samples. You could, of course, change this to however many you want. I just found that a 3x3 plot works pretty good in practice. And I'm going to set n rows. So for my matplotlib plot, I want 3 rows and I want 3 columns. And so I'm going to enumerate through the samples in test samples. And then I'm going to create a subplot for each sample. So create a subplot, because this is going to create a subplot because it's within the loop. Each time it goes through a new sample, create a subplot of n rows and cols. And the index it's going to be on is going to be I plus 1, because it can't start at 0. So we just put I plus 1 in there. What's going on here? Enumerate. Oh, excuse me. In enumerate. Wonderful. So now we're going to plot the target image. We can go plot.imshow. We're going to get sample.squeeze because we need to remove the batch dimension. And then we're going to set the CMAP is equal to gray. What's this telling me up here? Oh no, that's correct. Next, we're going to find the prediction label in text form because we don't want it in numeric form. We could do that, but we want to look at things visually with human readable language, such as Sandal for whatever class Sandal is, whatever number class that is. we're going to set the pred label equals class names, and we're going to index using the pred class's I value. So right now we're going to plot our sample, we're going to find its prediction, and now we're going to get the truth label. So we also want this in text form. And what is the truth label going to be? Well, the truth label is we're going to have to index using class names and index on that using test labels I. So we're just matching up our indexes here. Finally, we're going to create a title for the plot. And now here's what I like to do as well. If we're getting visual, well, we might as well get really visual, right? So I think we can change the color of the title text depending if the prediction is right or wrong. So I'm going to create a title using an F string. Pred is going to be a pred label, and the truth label. We could even plot the prediction probabilities here if we wanted to. That might be an extension that you might want to try. And so here we're going to check for equality between pred and truth and change color of title text. So what I mean by this, it's going to be a lot easier to explain if we just, if in doubt, code it out. So if the pred label equals the truth label, so they're equal, I want the plot.title to be the title text, but I want the font size, well, the font size can be the same, 10. I want the color to equal green. So if they're, so green text, if prediction, same as truth, and else, I'm going to set the plot title to have title text, font size equals 10, and the color is going to be red. So does that make sense? All we're doing is we're enumerating through our test samples that we got up here, test samples that we found randomly from the test dataset. And then each time we're creating a subplot, we're plotting our image. We're finding the prediction label by indexing on the class names with our pred class's value. We're getting the truth label, and we're creating a title for the plot that compares the pred label to the truth, and we're changing the color of the title text depending if the pred label is correct or not. So let's see what happens. Did we get it right?
Grand gates lead to the court. It was here, when this was a mosque, that worshippers would gather to wash before prayer, as directed by Muslim law. Entering, you step into a forest of delicate columns and graceful arches dating from over 1,000 years ago. At its zenith, this mosque was the center of Western Islam and the heart of a cultural capital that rivaled Baghdad and Constantinople. A wonder of the medieval world, it's remarkably well preserved, giving today's visitors a chance to appreciate Islamic Cordoba in its 10th century prime. The columns and arches seem to recede to infinity, as if reflecting the immensity and complexity of God's creation. The mihrab, the focal point of worship in a mosque, was built in the mid-10th century. It's richly mosaicked with 3,000 pounds of tiny multicolored glass and enamel cubes. A painting in the adjacent treasury takes us back to 1236 when Christians conquered the city and everything changed. Here we see the Spanish king accepting the keys to Cordoba's fortified gate from the vanquished Muslims. According to legend, one morning Muslims said their last prayers in the great mosque. That afternoon, the Christians set up their portable road altar and celebrated the first Mass in what would later become this glorious cathedral. As if planting a cross into its religious heart, this grand cathedral was built in the middle of the mosque. Taking 2 centuries to complete, the cathedral is a glorious mix of Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque styles. A statue actually called St. James the Moorslayer stands next to the altar. Sword raised as usual, James is busy conquering Muslims. Other art is less provocative. The Baroque-era choir stalls are made of New World mahogany. With exquisite carving, it's considered one of the masterpieces of 18th century Andalusian Baroque. And towering over the former mosque, a bell tower makes it clear this huge edifice now houses a place of Christian worship. In the 10th century, when a minaret stood where the bell tower stands today, Cordoba was arguably Europe's greatest city. It was a cultural capital with probably 10 times the population of Paris. Imagine the city. It had paved streets, lit at night by oil lamps, piped-in running water, hundreds of mosques, palaces, and public baths. It was a city of poets and scholars. While things changed later, the golden age of Al-Andalus, as this society was called, was marked by a remarkable spirit of tolerance and cooperation among all religions. To learn more, I'm joined by my friend and fellow tour guide, Isabel Martinez. So Jews, Christians, and Muslims all living together peacefully here.
Yes, certainly. It worked out during certain times, especially during the 10th century.
3 different cultures together.
Well, that's what most of the people think, but I think it's more correct to say it was one culture with 3 religions, because at the end, all the people here talked Arabian language, cooked the same dishes, and wore the same clothes.
Okay, 1 culture, 3 religions.
Exactly.
Al-Andalus.
Magic time.
Cordoba's narrow, flower-bedecked lanes invite exploration. With Isabel's help, a simple stroll becomes meaningful.
Notice how nice and fresh this little streets are, Rick?
Yes.
It's narrowness and whitewashed walls, natural air conditioning.
It feels cool.
It's brilliant. So this beautiful shutter reminds us of the times when the women were hidden from public. Muslim Cordoba had hundreds of mosques, but most of them were destroyed. But some minarets survived as church bell towers.
So this was a minaret first, and now it's a bell tower for that
exactly.
church. Cordoba's characteristic patios have functioned like outdoor living rooms since ancient Roman times. They're quiet, an oasis from the heat, and filled with flowers. Locals decorate them with pride. In fact, each year, many compete and open their patios to the public. And here, as throughout Andalusia, festivals fill the calendar. We're here for the Festival of the Crosses, where each neighborhood parties around its own cross made of carnations. Church bells ring not only a call to prayer, but a call to fiesta. Neighbors pack the squares for a community party. This barrio entered for the first time this year. They won, and they've been reveling ever since. Major squares host bigger events. I find experiencing traditional flamenco culture celebrated by and for the locals beats any tourist show. Here in Andalusia, revelry and religiosity seem to go hand in hand as the same passion and energy is put into long, sober religious processions which clog the city's narrow streets. Trumpets blare a fanfare, children carry candles, and everyone runs to the streets to be part of the procession. Many of these same locals will party on squares until late into the night. Others will sit down to a classic Andalusian dinner. Isabel has invited us to Bodegas Campos, a historic and venerable house of eating for our own festival of Andalusian specialties. And here in Andalusia, no special meal starts without the porcine gold standard, jamón ibérico.
This is a special good one.
Jamón.
Jamón ibérico,
Why does it taste so good? The jamón ibérico.
because the pig lives outside.
Okay, so he's
It lives in the
running around.
countryside. It's free.
After the jamón ibérico, the plates just keep on coming. This place specializes in traditional Andalusian fare, rustic food that originated with the peasantry. And a few dishes have a Moorish influence. But if there's one common denominator to all the food, it's
Olive oil. Definitely.
the finale, definitely for carnivores only, is pork from the Iberian black pig, and what could be more Spanish, bull's tail.
We've had 9 different plates.
Yeah, we love eating and we love sitting around the table for hours.
It's living well.
Yeah, that's Andalusian lifestyle.
A 2-hour drive west takes us into Andalusia's mountainous interior, where the route of the Pueblos Blancos laces together a characteristic string of whitewashed hill towns. Whether crouching in a ravine or perched atop a hill, each town, painted white to stay cool in the scorching summers, has a personality and a story of its own. Zahara, set under its imposing castle, was a Moorish stronghold in the 13th century. Its breathtaking perch was typical of towns that had to play hard to get during that centuries-long struggle by Christian forces to push the Moors back south and reconquer this part of Europe. And in the Reconquista, Zahara was a strategic prize. Today, Zahara is a delight to explore. The tour's quick, a church, a plaza, a few sleepy restaurants, and a grand view. The dramatic road linking the towns cuts through the Sierra de Grazalema Natural Park. This park is famed throughout Spain for its lush and rugged mountain scenery. The queen of the white towns is Arcos de la Frontera. Arcos smothers its hilltop, tumbling down its back like the train of a wedding dress. The old center is a delight to explore. Viewpoint hop all the way through town. The people of Arcos boast that only they see the backs of the birds as they fly. Feel the wind funnel through the narrow streets as cars inch around tight corners. Driving is tricky. It's a one-way system. If you miss your hotel, you'll circle all the way around again. Under the castle and facing the church is the town's main square, which once doubled as a bull ring. Towns like Arcos, with de la Frontera in their names, were established on the frontier. That was on the front lines during that centuries-long fight to take Spain back from the Muslims. As the Moors were slowly pushed back into North Africa, the towns, while no longer of any strategic importance, kept on the frontier in their names. The main church is a reminder of that reconquest. After Christian forces retook Arcos, it was the same old story. The mosque was demolished, and a church was built on its ruins. Another short drive takes us to the biggest whitewashed town on the route, Ronda, with nearly 40,000 people. While crowded with day-tripping tourists from the nearby Costa del Sol, early and late in the day, locals retake their streets and squares. Ronda is famous for its gorge-straddling setting. Its breathtaking perch, while visually dramatic today, was practical and vital when it was built. For the Moors, it provided a tough bastion, one of the last to be conquered by the Spaniards in 1485. The ravine divides Ronda into its old Moorish town and the relatively modern new town, which was built after the Christian reconquest. The two towns were connected by this bridge in the late 1700s. Part of the joy of Ronda lies in exploring the twisted lanes of its Moorish quarter. As you wander among its beautiful balconies and exuberant flower pots, Each corner reveals yet another surprise. This cliffside mansion comes with a Belle Epoque garden. And from the garden, an evocative staircase leads to the floor of the gorge. It was dug 7 centuries ago by the Moors to access water. Imagine Christian slaves hauling water in leather bags up these stairs all day long. The landing where the staircase finally hits the river marks a legendary turning point in Ronda's history. In 1485, Reconquista forces took control of this, the city's water source, and within 10 days, thirsty Ronda above surrendered. At the base of the town is the old bridge, some surviving bits of the old Moorish city walls, and the remains of what was for centuries the main gate to the walled city. Back when Ronda was a fortified town under Muslim rule, you entered from here. And according to Moorish custom, before entering, you'd wash and pray. That's why there was a public bath and mosque just outside the gate. I stay right in the old town action. Hotel San Gabriel has great character. It's well run, with inviting public rooms and bedrooms that make you feel quite noble. And just over the bridge, the newer town, while more stately, has equally inviting streets and plazas. Strolling the streets, you feel a strong sense of community, where everyone seems to know everyone. While I generally go for the rustic old bars, tonight a local friend's taking me to a modern one. Traga Tapas puts a contemporary spin on traditional tapas. We're just eating our way through the entire list of daily specials. Sure, you'll find your olives and ham, but you'll also enjoy asparagus snowed in with manchego cheese, delicate cod cheek sandwiches, and spicy pulled pork. One basic rule is the same everywhere. If you want a chance to mingle with locals, grab a stool at the bar. Ronda is near and dear to Spaniards as the birthplace of modern bullfighting. It has the first great Spanish bull ring, built in 1785. Visitors can imagine confronting the bull as it thunders into the ring. The arena's columns corral the action, creating a kind of neoclassical theater. Bullfighting originated as a form of military training, refined knights fighting the noble beast on horseback. It evolved to the spectacle that survives to this day. While controversial to many for its brutality, aficionados insist bullfighting's not a sport, it's an art form. And the Museum of Bullfighting celebrates this tradition. Matadors in their suits of light were heartthrobs. Etchings by the great Spanish painter Goya show that he was clearly an enthusiast. The museum feels like a shrine to Pedro Romero. In the 18th century, Romero established the rules of modern bullfighting. After Ronda, we wind out of the Andalusian mountains and leave Spain for a visit to England's famed Rock of Gibraltar. Gibraltar stands like a fortress, the gateway to the Mediterranean. A stubborn little piece of old England, it's one of the last bits of a British Empire that at one time controlled a quarter of the planet. The rock itself seems to represent stability and power. And as if to remind visitors that they've left Spain and entered the United Kingdom, international flights land on this airstrip which runs along the border. Car traffic has to stop for each plane. Still, entering Gibraltar is far easier today than back when Franco blockaded this border. From the late 1960s until the 80s, the only way in was by sea or air. Now, you just have to wait for the
Ooh, yes, we did. Oh, I'm going to do one more thing. I want to turn off the axes, just so we get more real estate. I love these kind of plots. It helps that our model got all of these predictions right. So look at this. Pred, sandal, truth, sandal. Pred, trouser, truth, trouser. So that's pretty darn good, right? See how, for me, I much prefer visualizing things. Numbers on a page look good, but there's something there's nothing quite like visualizing your machine learning model's predictions, especially when it gets it right. So how about we select some different random samples up here? We could functionize this as well to do like all of this code in one hit, but that's all right. We'll be a bit hacky. For now. So this is just going to randomly sample with no seed at all. So your samples might be different to mine. 9 different samples. So this time we have an ankle boot. We'll make some predictions. We'll just step through all of this code here. And oh, there we go. It got one wrong. So all of these are correct. But this is more interesting as well, is where does your model get things wrong? So it predicted a dress, but this is a coat. Now, do you think that this could be potentially a dress? To me, I could see that as being a dress. So I kind of understand where the model's coming from there. Let's make some more random predictions. We might do 2 more of these before we move on to the next video. Oh, all correct. We're interested in getting some wrong here. So our model seems to be too good. All correct again. Okay, one more time. If we don't get any wrong, we're going on to the next video. But this is just really, oh, there we go, 2 wrong. Beautiful. So I predicted a dress, and that's a shirt. Okay, I can kind of see where the model might have stuffed up there. It's a little bit long for a shirt for me, but I can still understand that that would be a shirt. And this is a pullover, but the truth is a coat. So maybe there's some issues with the labels. And that's probably what you'll find in a lot of data sets, especially quite large ones. Just with the sheer law of large numbers, there may be some truth labels in your data sets that you work with that are wrong. And so that's why I like to compare the model's predictions versus the truth on a bunch of random samples to go, you know what, is our model's results better or worse than they actually are? And that's what visualizing helps you do, is figure out, you know what, our model is actually, it says it's good on the accuracy, but when we visualize the predictions, it's not too good, and vice versa, right? So you can keep playing around with this, try look at some more random samples by running this again. We'll do one more for good luck, and then we'll move on to the next video. We're going to go on to another way. Oh, see, this is another example. Some labels here could be confusing. And speaking of confusing, well, that's going to be a spoiler for the next video. But do you see how the prediction is a t-shirt top, but the truth is a shirt? To me, that label is kind of overlapping. Like, I don't know, what's the difference between a t-shirt and a shirt? So that's something that you'll find as you train models, is maybe your model's going to tell you about your data as well. And so we hinted that this is going to be confused. The model is confused between t-shirt, top, and shirt. How about we plot a confusion matrix in the next video? I'll see you there. We're up to a very exciting point in evaluating our machine learning model, and that is visualizing, visualizing, visualizing. And we saw that in the previous video, our model kind of gets a little bit confused, and in fact, I would personally get confused at the difference between t-shirt/top and a shirt. So these kind of insights into our model's predictions can also give us insights into maybe some of our labels could be improved. And another way to check that is to make a confusion matrix. So let's do that, making a confusion matrix for further prediction evaluation. Now, a confusion matrix is another one of my favorite ways of evaluating a classification model, because that's what we're doing. We're doing multi-class classification. And if you recall, if we go back to section 2 of the LearnPyTorch.io book, and then if we scroll down, we have a section here, more classification evaluation metrics. So accuracy is probably the gold standard of classification evaluation. There's precision, there's recall, there's F1 score, and there's a confusion matrix here. So how about we try to build one of those? I want to get this and copy this. So, and write down, a confusion matrix is a fantastic way of evaluating your classification models. Visually. Beautiful. So we're going to break this down. First of all, we need to plot a confusion matrix, we need to make predictions with our trained model on the test data set. Number 2, we're going to make a confusion matrix. And to do so, we're going to leverage torch metrics. Tricks, I have to figure out how to spell metrics then. Confusion matrix. So recall that torch metrics, we've touched on this before, is a great package. Torch metrics for a whole bunch of evaluation metrics of machine learning models in PyTorch flavor. So if we find, we've got classification metrics, we've got audio, image detection. Look how this is beautiful. A bunch of different evaluation metrics. And if we go down over here, we've got confusion matrix. So I only touched on 5 here, or 6. But if you look at torch metrics, they've got, how many is that? About 25 different classification metrics. So if you want some extra curriculum, you can read through these. But let's go to confusion matrix. And if we look at some code here, we've got torch metrics, confusion matrix. We need to pass in number of classes. We can normalize if we want. And do you notice how this is quite similar to the PyTorch documentation? Well, that's the beautiful thing about torch metrics, is that it's created with PyTorch in mind. So let's try out, if you wanted to try it out on some tester code, you could do it here, but since we've already got some of our own code, let's just bring in this. And then number 3 is to plot it. We've got another helper package here. Plot the confusion matrix using MLExtend. So this is another one of my favorite helper libraries for machine learning things. It's got a lot of functionality that you can code up yourself, but you often find yourself coding it a few too many times, such as plotting a confusion matrix. So if we look up MLExtend, plot confusion matrix, this is a wonderful library. I believe it was created by, Sebastian Raschke, who's a machine learning researcher and also author of a great book. There he is. Yeah, this is a side note, Machine Learning with PyTorch and Scikit-learn. I just got this book. It just got released in the start of 2022, and it's a great book. So that's a little side note for learning more about machine learning with PyTorch and Scikit-learn. So shout out to Sebastian Raschke. Thank you for this package as well. This is going to just help us plot a confusion matrix like this. So we'll have our predicted labels on the bottom and our true labels on the side here, but we can just copy this code in here. Link, sorry, and then confusion matrix, we can copy that in here. The thing is that Torch Metrics doesn't come with Google Colab. So if you're using Google Colab, I think MLExtend does, but we need a certain version of MLExtend that Google Colab doesn't yet have, So we actually need version 0.19.0. But we're going to import those in a second. Let's first make some predictions across our entire test dataset. So previously, we made some predictions only on 9 random samples. So random sample, we selected 9. You could, of course, change this number to make it on more, but this was only on 9 samples. Let's write some code to make predictions across our entire test dataset. So import tqdm.auto for progress bar tracking. tqdm auto. We don't need to re-import it. I believe we've already got it above, but I'm just going to do it anyway for completeness. And so we're going to make, this is step 1. Above, make predictions. Make predictions with trained model. Our trained model is model 2. So let's create an empty predictions list. So we can add our predictions to that. We're going to set our model into evaluation mode. And we're going to set with Torch inference mode as our context manager. And then inside that, let's just build the same sort of code that we used for our testing loop, except this time we're going to append all of our predictions to a list. So we're going to iterate through the test data loader, and we can give our TQDM description. We're going to say making predictions, ... You'll see what that looks like in a minute. And here we are going to send the data and targets to target device. So xy equals x to device and y to device. Wonderful. And we're going to do the forward pass. So we're going to create y logit. Remember, the raw outputs of a model with a linear layer at the end are referred to as logits. And we don't need to calculate the loss, but we want to turn predictions from logits to prediction probabilities to prediction labels. So we'll set here ypred equals torch.softmax. You could actually skip the torch softmax step if you wanted to and just take the argmax of the logits, but we will just go from prediction probabilities to pred labels for completeness. So squeeze, and we're going to do it across the first dimension, or the 0th dimension, and then we'll take the argmax of that across the first dimension as well. And a little tidbit, if you take different dimensions here, you'll probably get different values, so just check the inputs and outputs of your code to make sure you're using the right dimension here. And so let's go put predictions on CPU for evaluation, because if we're going to plot anything, Matplotlib will want them on the CPU. So we're going to append our predictions to ypreds, ypred.cpu. Beautiful. And because we're going to have a list of different predictions, we can use concatenate, list of predictions, into a tensor. So let's just print out ypreds and so I can show you what it looks like. And then if we go ypred tensor, this is going to turn our list of predictions into a single tensor. And then we'll go ypred tensor, and we'll view the first 10. Let's see if this works. So making prediction tensor, and we'll view the first 10. Let's see if this works. So making predictions. Oh! Would you? And we'll view the first 10. Let's see if this works. So making predictions. Oh, would you look at that? Okay, so yeah, here's our list of predictions. A big list of tenses. Right, we don't really want it like that, so if we get rid of that, and there's our progress bar. It's going through each batch in the test data loader, so there's 313 batches of 32. So if we comment out print ypreds, this line here, torch.cat ypreds, is going to turn these tensors into a single tensor, or this list of tensors into a single tensor. Concatenate. Now, if we have a look, there we go. Beautiful. And if we have a look at the whole thing, we're making predictions every single time here, but that's all right. They are pretty quick. There we go. One big long tensor. And then if we check length, y, pred, tensor, there should be one prediction per test sample. 10,000. Beautiful. So now we need to install Torch Metrics because Torch Metrics doesn't come with Google Colab at the time of recording. So let me just show you if we try to import Torch Metrics. It doesn't, it might in the future, so just keep that in mind. It might come with Google Colab because it's a pretty useful package. But let's now install, see if required packages are installed, and if not, install them. So we'll just install Torch Metrics. We'll finish off this video by trying to import. We'll set up a try and except loop. So Python is going to try import Torch Metrics and ML Extend. I write it like this because you may already have Torch Metrics and ML Extend if you're running this code on a local machine. But if you're running it in Google Colab, which I'm sure many of you are, we are going to try and import it anyway. And if it doesn't work, we're going to install it. So ML Extend, I'm just going to check the version here because we need version for our plot confusion matrix function. This one, we need version 0.19.0 or higher. So I'm just going to write a little statement here. Assert int ML Extend .version. So if this condition in the try loop or try block is accepted, it will skip the next step. .split, and I'm just going to check the first index string is greater than or equal to 19. Otherwise, I'm going to return an error saying ML Extend version should be 0.19.0 or higher. And so let me just show you what this looks like. If we run this here. String and int. Did I not turn it into a string? Oh, excuse me. There we go. And I don't need that bracket on the end. There we go. So that's what I'm saying. So this is just saying what this looks like. If we run this here, string and int. Did I not turn it into need that bracket on the end? There we go. So that's what I'm saying. So this is just saying hey, the version of ML Extend that you have should be 0 or should be 19 or higher, because right now Google Colab by default has 14. This may change in the future. So let's finish off this except block. If the above condition fails, which it should, we are going to pip install. So we're going to install this into Google Colab. Torch Metrics, we're going to do it quietly. And we're also going to pass the U tag for update ML Extend. So import Torch Metrics, ML Extend afterwards, after it's been installed and upgraded, and print. We're going to go ML Extend version. We're going to go ML Extend _ version. And let's see what happens if we run this. So we should see, yeah, some installation happening here. This is going to install Torch Metrics. Oh, do we not have ML Extend, the upgraded version? Let's have a look. We may need to restart our Google Colab instance. Ah, okay. Let's take this off. Quiet. Is this going to tell us to restart Google Colab? Well, let's restart our runtime. After you've run this cell, if you're using Google Colab, you may have to restart your runtime to reflect the fact that we have the updated version of ML Extend. So I'm going to restart my runtime now. Otherwise, we won't be able to plot our confusion matrix. We need 0.19.0. And I'm going to run all of these cells. So I'm going to pause the video here, run all of the cells by clicking Run All. Note, if you run into any errors, you will have to run those cells manually. And then I'm going to get back down to this cell and make sure that I have MLExtend version 0.1.9. I'll see you in a few seconds. I'm back, and just a little heads up, if you restart your runtime and click Run All, your Colab notebook will stop running cells if it runs into an error. So this is that error we found in a previous video where our data and model were on different devices. So to skip past that, we can just jump to the next cell, and we can click Run After. There we go. And it's going to run all of the cells after for us. It's going to retrain our models. Everything's going to get rerun, and then we're going to come right back down to where we were before, trying to install the updated version of MLExtend. I'm going to write some more code while our code is running. Import MLExtend, and then I'm going to just make sure that we've got the right version here. You may require a runtime restart, you may not. So just try to see after you've run this install of Torchmetrics and upgrade of MLExtend. See if you can re-import MLExtend, and if you have the version 0.19.0 or above, we should be able to run the code. Yeah, there we go. Wonderful. MLExtend 0.19.0, and we've got MLExtend version, assert, import. Beautiful. So we've got a lot of extra code here. In the next video, let's move forward with creating a confusion matrix. I just wanted to show you how to install and upgrade some packages in Google Colab if you don't have them. But now we've got predictions across our entire test data set. And we're going to be moving towards using confusion matrix function here to compare our predictions versus the target data of our test data set. So I'll see you in the next video. Let's plot a confusion matrix. Welcome back. In the last video, we wrote a bunch of code to import some extra libraries that we need for plotting a confusion matrix. This is really helpful, by the way. Google Colab comes with a lot of pre-built installed stuff, but definitely later on down the track, you're going to need to have some experience installing stuff, and this is just one way that you can do it. And we also made predictions across our entire test data set. So we've got 10,000 predictions in this tensor, and what we're going to do with the confusion matrix is confirm or compare these predictions to the target labels in our test data set. So we've done step number 1, and we've prepared ourselves for step 2 and 3 by installing Torchmetrics and installing MLExtend, or the later version of MLExtend. So now let's go through step 2, making a confusion matrix, and step 3, plotting that confusion matrix. This is going to look so good. I love how good confusion matrices look. So because we've got Torchmetrics now, we're going to import the confusion matrix class, and from MLExtend, we're going to go into the plotting module and import plot confusion matrix. Recall that the documentation for both of these are within Torchmetrics here and within MLExtend here. Let's see what they look like. So number 2 is set up confusion matrix instance and compare predictions to targets. That's what evaluating a model is, right? Comparing our model's predictions to the target predictions. So I'm going to set up a confusion matrix under the variable confmat. Then I'm going to call the confusion matrix class from Torchmetrics. And to set up an instance of it, I need to pass in the number of classes that we have. So because we have 10 classes, they are all contained within class names. Recall that class names is a list of all of the different classes that we're working with. So I'm just going to pass in the number of classes as the length of our class names. And then I can use that confmat instance, confusion matrix instance, to create a confusion matrix tensor by passing into confmat, which is what I've just created up here. Confmat, just like we do with our loss function, I'm going to pass in preds equals our ypred tensor, which is just above ypred tensor that we calculated all of the predictions on the test data set. There we go. That's our preds. And our target is going to be equal to test data dot target. And this is our test data dataset that we've seen before. So if we go test data and press tab, we've got a bunch of different attributes. We can get the classes, and of course we can get the targets, which is the labels. PyTorch calls labels targets. I usually refer to them as labels, but the target is the test data target. So we want to compare our model's predictions on the test data set to our test data targets. And so let's keep going forward. We're up to step number 3 now. So this is going to create our confusion matrix tensor. Well, let's see what that looks like actually. Confmat tensor.
plane to taxi by. And Bob's your uncle. The sea once reached these ramparts. A modern development grows into the harbor, and today half the city is built upon reclaimed land. Gibraltar's old town is long and skinny, with one main street. Gibraltarians are a proud bunch. Remaining steadfastly loyal to Britain, its 30,000 residents vote overwhelmingly to continue as a self-governing British dependency. Within a generation, the economy has gone from one dominated by the military to one based on tourism. But it's much more than sunburned Brits on holiday. Gibraltar is a crossroads community, with a jumble of Muslims, Jews, Hindus, and Italians joining the English, and all crowded together at the base of this mighty rock. With its strategic setting, Gibraltar has an illustrious military history, and remnants of its martial past are everywhere. The rock is honeycombed with tunnels. Many were blasted out by the Brits in Napoleonic times. During World War II, Britain drilled 30 more miles of tunnels. The 100-ton gun is one of many cannon that both protected Gibraltar and controlled shipping in the strait. A cable car whisks visitors from downtown to the rock's 1,400-foot summit. From the top of the rock, Spain's Costa del Sol arcs eastward. And 15 miles across the hazy Strait of Gibraltar, the shores of Morocco beckon. These cliffs and those over in Africa created what ancient societies in the Mediterranean world called the Pillars of Hercules. For centuries, they were the foreboding gateway to the unknown. Descending the rock, whether you like it or not, you'll meet the famous Apes of Gibraltar. 200 of these mischief makers entertain tourists. And with all the visitors, they're bold and they get their way.
Yeah, you can have it. You can. Here on the Rock of Gibraltar, the locals are very friendly, but give them your apples.
Legend has it that as long as these apes are here, the British will stay in Gibraltar. Sweeping north from this southernmost tip of Europe, in a couple of hours, we're in my vote for the most exciting single city to experience in Andalusia. Seville, or Sevilla as they say here, is the biggest city in Andalusia and packed with sightseeing fun. Walking its streets, you're immersed in a flamboyant city of larger-than-life lovers like Carmen and Don Juan, where bullfighting is still politically correct and where little girls still dream of growing up to become flamenco dancers. Sevilla has soul and a contagious love of life.
Sevilla was Europe's gateway to the New World in the 16th century. It flourished during the Age of Discovery. The explorers Christopher Columbus, Ferdinand Magellan, and Amerigo Vespucci all sailed from right here.
The Golden Tower was the starting and ending point for trade with the New World. For centuries, part of the city's fortifications, it came with a heavy chain draped across the river to protect the harbor. In the 16th century, Sevilla's golden age was powered by New World riches.
In the 17th century, all that money made the city an important center of arts and culture. In the 18th century, as its harbor silted up and the Spanish Empire crumbled, Sevilla's power faded. And in the 19th century, the once powerful, now quaint Sevilla became an important stop on the Romantic-era Grand Tour of Europe.
In the 20th century, 1992 to be exact, Sevilla hosted a World's Fair that left the city with today's striking 21st century infrastructure. Dramatic bridges, a sleek new train system, and even a new airport. Today, 700,000 people, it's Spain's fourth largest city, an exuberant Andalusian capital. But the charm of Sevilla is best enjoyed in its traditions. Like flamenco, Spaniards consider Andalusia the home of flamenco. While impromptu flamenco still erupts spontaneously in old world bars, most tourists attend a show like this. The men do most of the machine gun footwork. The women concentrate on graceful turns and a smooth, dramatic step. Flamenco guitarists with their lightning-fast finger roll strums are among the best in the world. The intricate rhythms are set by castanets and hand clapping. In the raspy-voiced wails of the singers, you'll hear echoes of the Muslim call to prayer, an evocative reminder of centuries of Moorish rule. The town square.
Ooh, okay. So we've got a fair bit going on here, but let's turn this into a pretty version of this. So along the bottom is going to be our predicted labels, and along the side here is going to be our true labels, but this is where the power of ML Extend comes in. We're going to plot our confusion matrix. So let's create a figure and an axis. We're going to call the function plot confusion matrix that we've just imported above, and we're going to pass in our confmat equals our confmat tensor. But because we're working with matplotlib, it'll want it as numpy. So I'm just going to write here, matplotlib likes working with numpy, and we're going to pass in the class names so that we get labels for each of our rows and columns. Class names, this is just a list of our text-based class names. And then I'm going to set the fig size to my favorite hand in poker, which is 10.7. Also happens to be a good dimension for Google Colab. Look at that! In poker, which is 10.7. Also happens to be a good dimension for Google Colab. Look at that! Oh, that is something beautiful to see. Now, a confusion matrix, the ideal confusion matrix will have all of the diagonal rows darkened with all of the values and no values here, no values here. Because that means that the predicted label lines up with the true label. So in our case, we have definitely a very dark diagonal here. But let's dive into some of the highest numbers here. It looks like our model is predicting shirt when the true label is actually t-shirt/top. So that is reflective of what we saw before. Do we still have that image there? Okay, we don't have an image there, but in a previous video, we saw that when we plotted our predictions, the model predicted t-shirt/top when it was actually a shirt, and of course, vice versa. So what's another one here? Looks like our model is predicting shirt when it's actually a coat. And now, this is something that you can use to visually inspect your data to see if the errors that your model is making make sense from a visual perspective. So it's getting confused by predicting pullover when the actual label is coat, predicting pullover when the actual label is shirt. So a lot of these things, clothing-wise and data-wise, may in fact look quite the same. Here's a relatively large one as well. It's predicting sneaker when it should be an ankle boot. So it's confusing two different types of shoes there. So this is just a way to further evaluate your model and start to go, maybe our labels are a little bit confusing. Could we expand them a little bit more? So keep that in mind. A confusion matrix is one of the most powerful ways to visualize your classification model predictions. And a really, really, really helpful way of creating one is to use Torchmetrics confusion matrix. And to plot it, you can use plot confusion matrix from MLExtend. However, if you're using Google Colab for these, you may need to import them or install them. So that's a confusion matrix. If you'd like more classification metrics, you've got them here. And you've got, of course, more in Torchmetrics. So give that a look. I think in the next video, we've done a fair bit of evaluation. Where are we up to in our workflow? I believe it's time we saved and loaded our best trained model. So let's give that a go. I'll see you in the next video. In the last video, we created a beautiful confusion matrix with the power of Torchmetrics and MLExtend. But now it's time to save and load our best model, because if we evaluated it, our convolutional neural network, and go, you know what, this model's pretty good. Let's export it to a file so we can use it somewhere else. Let's see how we do that. And by the way, if we go into our keynote, we've got evaluate model, Torchmetrics. We've been through this a fair few times now. We've improved through experimentation. We haven't used TensorBoard yet, but that'll be in a later video. And save and reload your trained model. So here's where we're up to. If we've gone through all these steps enough times and we're like, you know what, let's save our model so we can use it elsewhere, and we can reload it in to make sure that it's saved correctly. Let's go through with this step. We want number 11. We're going to go save and load best performing model. You may have already done this before, so if you've been through the other parts of the course, you definitely have. So if you want to give that a go, pause the video now and try it out yourself. I believe we did it in notebook number 1. We have, here we go, saving and loading a PyTorch model. You can go through this section of section number 1 on your own and see if you can do it. Otherwise, let's code it out together. So I'm going to start with importing path from pathlib, because I like to create a model directory path. So create model directory path. So my model path is going to be set equal to path, and I'm going to save it to models. This is where I want to create a file over here called models and save my models to there. Model path.mkdir for make directory. Parents, yes, I want it to make the parent directories if they don't exist. And exist okay also equals true. So if we try to create it, but it's already existing, we're not going to get an error. That's fine. And next, we're going to create a model save path. Just going to add some code cells here so we have more space. Let's pass in here our model name. Going to set this equal to, since we're on section 3, I'm going to call this O3 PyTorch Computer Vision Model 2 is our best model. And I'm going to save it to PTH for PyTorch. You can also save it to .pt. I like to use PTH. And we're going to go model save path equal model path slash model name. So now if we have a look at this, we're going to have a path called model save path, but it's going to be a POSIX path in models O3 PyTorch Computer Vision model 2.pth. And if we have a look over here, we should have, we have a models directory now. That's not going to have anything in it at the moment. We've got our data directory that we had before. There's fashion mnest. This is a good way to start setting up your directories. Break them down, data, models, helper function files, etc. But let's keep going. Let's save the model state dict. We're going to go print saving model to, just going to give us some information about what's happening. Model save path. And we can save a model by calling torch.save. And we pass in the object that we want to save using the object parameter, obj. And we get a doc string there. We're going to go model 2. We want to save the state dict. Recall that the state dict is going to be our model's what? Our model's learned parameters on the data set. So all the weights and biases and all that sort of jazz. Beautiful. So when we first created model 2, these were all random numbers. They've been, or since we trained model 2 on our training data, these have all been updated to represent the training images. And we can leverage these later on, as you've seen before, to make predictions. So I'm not going to go through all those, but that's what we're saving. And the file path is going to be our model save path. So let's run this and see what happens. Beautiful. We're saving our model to our model directory. And now let's have a look in here. Do we have a model? Yes, we do. Beautiful. So that's how quickly we can save a model. Of course, you can customize what the name is, where you save it, etc., etc. Now, let's see what happens when we load it in. So create a new instance. Because we only saved the state dict of model 2, we need to create a new instance of our model 2, or how it was created, which was with our class fashion mnest v2. If we saved the whole model, we could just import it to a new variable, but I'll let you read back more on that and the different ways of saving a model in here. There's also a link to the PyTorch documentation. Would highly recommend that. But let's see it in action. We need to create a new instance of our fashion mnest model v2, which is our convolutional neural network. So I'm going to set the manual seed. That way when we create a new instance, it's instantiated with the same random numbers. So we're going to set up loaded model 2 equals fashion mnest v2. And it's important here that we set it up with the same parameters as our original saved model. So fashion mnest v2. Oh, we've got a typo here. Oh, fashion mnest model v2. Wonderful. So the input shape is going to be 1 because that is the number of color channels in our images. Test image.shape. Do we still have a test image? Should be, oh, well, we've created a different one, but our image size, our image shape is 12828. Image shape for color channels, height, width. Then we create it with hidden units. We use 10 for hidden units, so we can just set that here. This is important. They just have to, otherwise, if the shapes aren't the same, what are we going to get? We're going to get a shape mismatch error. And our output shape is what? Is also going to be 10, or length of class names. If you have the class names variable instantiated, that is. So we're going to load in the saved state dict, the one that we just saved. So we can go loaded model 2 dot load state dict, and we can pass in torch.load in here, and the file that we want to load, or the file path, is model save path up here. This is why I like to just save my path variables to a variable so that I can just use them later on, instead of retyping out this all the time, which is definitely prone to errors. So we're going to send the model to the target device. Loaded model 2.to device. Beautiful. Let's see what happens here. Wonderful. Beautiful. Let's see what happens here. Wonderful. So let's now evaluate the loaded model. So evaluate loaded model. The results should be very much the same as our Model 2 results. So Model 2 results. So this is what we're looking for. We want to make sure that our saved model saved these results pretty closely. Now I say pretty closely because you might find some discrepancies in these lower decimals here, just because of the way files get saved and something gets lost, etc., etc. So that's just to do with precision in computing. But as long as like the first few numbers are quite similar, well, then we're all gravy. So let's go torch manual seed. Remember, evaluating a model is almost as, well, is just as important as training a model. So this is what we're doing. We're making sure our model's saved correctly before we deployed it. If we deployed it and it didn't save correctly, well, then we would get less than ideal results, wouldn't we? So model equals loaded model 2. We're going to use our same eval model function, by the way. And of course, we're going to evaluate it on the same test data set that we've been using, test data loader. And we're going to create a loss function, or just put in our loss function that we've created before. And our accuracy function is the accuracy function we've been using throughout this notebook. So now let's check out loaded model 2 results. They should be quite similar to this one. We're going to make some predictions. And then if we go down, do we have the same numbers? Yes, we do. So we have 56829, 56829, wonderful. And 31358, 31358, beautiful. It looks like our loaded model gets the same results as our previously trained model before we even saved it. And if you wanted to check if they were close, you can also use torch.isClose, check if model results, if you wanted to check if they were close programmatically, that is, because we just looked at these visually, check if model results are close to each other. Now we can go torch is close. We're going to pass in torch.tensor. We have to turn these values into a tensor. We're going to go model to results, and we'll compare the model loss. How about we do that? We want to make sure the loss values are the same, or very close, that is, with torch.isClose. Torch.tensor, model, or we want this one to be loaded model 2 results. Model loss. Another bracket on the end there, and we'll see how close they are. True. Wonderful. Now, if this doesn't return true, you can also adjust the tolerance levels in here. So we go atol equals, this is going to be the absolute tolerance. So if we do 1 to the -8, it's saying like, hey, we need to make sure our results are basically the same up to 8 decimal points. That's probably quite low. I would say just make sure they're at least within 2. But if you're getting discrepancies here between your saved model and your loaded model, or sorry, this model here, the original one, and your loaded model, if they're quite large, so they're like more than a few decimal points off in this column or even here, I'd go back through your code and make sure that your model is saving correctly. Make sure you've got random seeds set up. But if they're pretty close, like in terms of within 3 or 2 decimal places of each other, well then I'd say that's close enough. But you can also adjust the tolerance level here to check if your model results are close enough programmatically. Wow, we have covered a fair bit here. We've gone through this entire workflow for a computer vision problem. Let's, in the next video, I think that's enough code for this section, section 3, PyTorch Computer Vision. I've got some exercises and some extra curriculum lined up for you. So let's have a look at those in the next video. I'll see you there. My goodness, look how much computer vision PyTorch code we've written together. We started off right up the top. We looked at the reference notebook and the online book. We checked out computer vision libraries in PyTorch, the main one being Torch Vision. Then we got a data set, namely the Fashion MNIST data set. There are a bunch more data sets that we could have looked at. And in fact, I'd encourage you to try some out in the torchvision.datasets. Use all of the steps that we've done here to try it on another data set. We prepared our data loaders, so turned our data into batches. We built a baseline model, which is an important step in machine learning because the baseline model is usually relatively simple and it's going to serve as a baseline that you're going to try and improve upon through, just go back to the keynote, through various experiments. We then made predictions with Model 0. We evaluated it. We timed our predictions to see if running our models on the GPU was faster, and we learned that sometimes the GPU won't necessarily speed up code if it's a relatively small data set because of the overheads between copying data from CPU to GPU. We tried a model with nonlinearity, and we saw that it didn't really improve upon our baseline model. But then we brought in the big guns, a convolutional neural network, replicating the CNN Explainer website, and by gosh, didn't we spend a lot of time here? I'd encourage you, as part of your extra curriculum, to go through this again and again. I still even come back to refer to it too. I referred to it a lot making the materials for this video section and this code section. So be sure to go back and check out the CNN Explainer website for more of what's going on behind the scenes of your CNNs. But we coded one using pure PyTorch. That is amazing. We compared our model results across different experiments. We found that our convolutional neural network did the best, although it took a little bit longer to train. And we also learned that the training time values will definitely vary depending on the hardware you're using. So that's just something to keep in mind. We made and evaluated random predictions with our best model, which is an important step in visualizing your model's predictions, because you could get evaluation metrics, but until you start to actually visualize what's going on, well, in my case, that's how I best understand what my model is thinking. We saw a confusion matrix using two different libraries, TorchMetrics and MLExtend, a great way to evaluate your classification models. And we saw how to save and load the best performing model to file and made sure that the results of our saved model weren't too different from the model that we trained within the notebook. So now it is time. I'd love for you to practice what you've gone through. This is actually really exciting now because you've gone through an end-to-end computer vision problem. I've got some exercises prepared. If you go to the learnpytorch.io website in section 03, scroll down, you can read through all of this. This is all the materials that we've just covered in pure code. There's a lot of pictures in this notebook too that are helpful to learn things, what's going on. We have some exercises here. So all of the exercises are focused on practicing the code in the sections above. We have 2 resources. We also have some extra curriculum that I've put together. If you want an in-depth understanding of what's going on behind the scenes in the convolutional neural networks, because we focused a lot on code, I'd highly recommend MIT's Introduction to Deep Computer Vision lecture. You can spend 10 minutes clicking through the different options in the PyTorch Vision library, Torch Vision, look up most common convolutional neural networks in the Torch Vision model library, and then for a large number of pre-trained PyTorch computer vision models. And if you get deeper into computer vision, you're probably going to run into the Torch Image Models library, otherwise known as TIM. But I'm going to leave that as extra curriculum. I'm going to just link this exercises section here. Again, it's at learnpytorch.io in the exercises section. We come down, there we go. But there is also a resource here, an exercise template notebook. So we've got one, what are 3 areas in industry where computer vision is being currently used? Now this is in the PyTorch Deep Learning repo, extras exercises number 3. I've put out some template code here for you to fill in these different sections. So some of them are code related, some of them are just text-based, but they should all be able to be completed by referencing what we've gone through in this notebook here. And just as one more, if we go back to PyTorch Deep Learning, this will probably be updated by the time you get here. You can always find the exercises and extra curriculum by going computer vision, go to exercises and extra curriculum. Or if we go into the extras file and then we go to solutions, I've now also started to add video walkthroughs of each of the solutions. So this is me going through each of the exercises myself and coding them. And so you'll get to
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to MIT Success 191. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in this course, and that's how we can give machines a sense of vision. Now, vision, I think, is one of the most important senses that humans possess. Sighted people rely on vision every single day, from things like navigation, manipulation, how you can pick up objects, how you can recognize objects, recognize complex human emotion and behaviors. And I think it's very safe to say that vision is a huge part of human life. Today, we're going to be learning about how deep learning can build powerful computer vision systems capable of solving extraordinary complex tasks that maybe just 15 years ago would have not even been possible to be solved. Now, one example of how vision is transforming or how deep learning is transforming computer vision is facial recognition. So on the top left, you can see an icon of the human eye, which visually represents vision coming into a deep neural network in the form of images or pixels or video. And on the output on the bottom, you can see a depiction of a human face or detecting human face, but this could also be recognizing different human faces or even emotions on the face, recognizing key facial features, etc. Now, deep learning has transformed this field specifically because it means that the creator of this AI does not need to tailor that algorithm specifically towards facial detection, but instead they can provide lots and lots of data to this algorithm and swap out this end piece. Instead of facial detection, they can swap it out for many other detection types or recognition types, and the neural network can try and learn to solve that task. So for example, we can replace that facial detection task with the detection of disease region in the retina of the eye. And similar techniques could also be applied throughout healthcare, medicine, and towards the detection and classification of many different types of diseases in biology and so on. Now, another common example is in the context of self-driving cars, where we take an image as input and try to learn an autonomous control system for that car. This is all entirely end-to-end. So we have vision and pixels coming in as input, and the actuation of the car coming in as output. Now, this is radically different than the vast majority of autonomous car companies and how they operate. So if you look at companies like Waymo and Tesla, this end-to-end approach is radically different. We'll talk more about this later on, but this is actually just one of the autonomous vehicles that we built here as part of my lab at CSAIL, so that's why I'm bringing it up. So now that we've gotten a sense of, at a very high level, some of the computer vision tasks that we as humans solve every single day, and that we can also train machines to solve, the next natural question I think to ask is, how can computers see? And specifically, how does a computer process an image or a video? How do they process pixels coming from those images? Well, to a computer, images are just numbers. And suppose we have this picture here of Abraham Lincoln. It's made up of pixels. Now, each of these pixels, since it's a grayscale image, can be represented by a single number. And now we can represent our image as a two-dimensional matrix of numbers, one for each pixel in that image. And that's how a computer sees this image. It sees it as just a matrix of two-dimensional numbers, or two-dimensional matrix of numbers, rather. Now, if we have an RGB image, a color image instead of a grayscale image, we can simply represent that as three of these two-dimensional images concatenated or stacked on top of each other, one for the red channel, one for the green channel, one for the blue channel, and that's RGB. Now we have a way to represent images to computers, and we can think about what types of computer vision tasks this will allow us to solve, and what we can.
Square is Plaza Nueva. It honors King Ferdinand III, fondly remembered for freeing Seville from the Moors in the 13th century. From here, wander into Sevilla's pedestrian zone shopping center, which Spaniards prefer to the suburban mall. This is the place for traditional Spanish fashions. But I wouldn't know my manchego from my mantilla without a little local help. My friend and local tour guide, Concepcion Delgado, has agreed to be my personal shopper.
So there's all these traditional things to buy. Isn't it just for tourists that they sell these?
No way, these are for locals. We love our things. We have preserved our traditions for centuries.
So these traditions are healthy.
Completely. This is one of my favorite shops. Buenos días.
Hola.
Good, and now let me show you the three most traditional accessories that women wear in Spain. Shawls, mantillas, and fans. Starting with the shawls that you can see here, big display of beautiful colors and embroideries, which are very practical for us too. We would use them as accessories, but they also have a function, which is warming you when you're cold. This is what we wear on top of the beautiful, nice flamenco dresses to attend to the April Feria. On top of the flamenco dress, you cannot wear a simple coat. You have to wear something more distinguished, which is a shawl. You can leave it like that.
Oh.
It's more sexy. Here we've got the mantilla. The mantilla is another accessory which can be in two colors, white or black. It's always combined with this comb, which is incorporated in the mantilla like this, and then we wear that on our heads.
Okay.
The white one, it's only for the feria, for the festival in April, when women wear them to attend the bullfights. Let's have a look at the fans now. As you can see, very different colors, different materials, but they're mostly made in wood. Remember that Sevilla gets very hot during the summer, and women, all ladies, use them especially when they attend services. Very old churches don't know air condition, and they are cooling themselves like this. Sometimes you hardly hear the priest, just that's all around you. In the old days, there was a language with fans, which is disappearing, but in the love game, it was very useful too. For example, you were looking at someone that you weren't interested at. You can go away because I don't like you much. But if you were really interested, that movement could tell him something, don't you think? Anyway, the most common movement for fun is
As we've seen elsewhere, the Moors left a distinct mark on Andalusian culture. Like Granada has its Alhambra and Cordoba has its Mezquita, Sevilla has its Alcazar. Built more than 600 years ago, this magnificent building still functions as a royal palace. The Alcazar provides a thought-provoking glimpse of a graceful Moorish world that might have survived its Christian conquerors, but didn't. What you see today is a 14th century rebuild done in Mudahar style. This was a Moorish style done by Moorish craftsmen, but for Christian rulers after the Reconquest. This became the King's Palace. Its centerpiece was the elegantly proportioned Court of the Maidens. It was decorated Mudahar below and Renaissance above. The king hired Muslim workers to give Moorish elegance to what was a stark fortress. They built what's considered the finest Mudahar building in all of Spain. The intimate doll's court was the king's living quarters. Imagine the royal family lounging around a reflecting pool in this courtyard. Once again, we see sacred verses in intricately carved Arabic script, but the decor here is clearly Christian. You'll see animals, buildings, and kings that you wouldn't normally find in religious Muslim art, which forbids images. A century or so later, just after Columbus's New World discoveries, Queen Isabel built a more European-style wing to the palace. Anticipating a big business in plunder and trade, she built this to administer Spain's New World ventures. The chapel is dedicated to Santa Maria de los Buenos Aires. Saint Mary of the Good Winds was the patron saint of navigators and a favorite of Columbus. This altar painting dates from shortly after Columbus died and features what's considered the first and most accurate portrait of the great explorer on the left.
Can perform given this foundation. Well, two common types of machine learning that we actually saw in lecture 1 and 2 yesterday are those of classification and those of regression. In regression, we have our output take a continuous value. In classification, we have our output take a continuous label. So let's first start with classification, and specifically the problem of image classification. We want to predict a single label for each image. Now, for example, we have a bunch of US presidents here, and we want to build the classification pipeline to determine which president is in this image that we're looking at, outputting the probability that this image is each of those US presidents. In order to correctly classify this image, our pipeline needs to be able to tell what is unique about a picture of Lincoln versus what is unique about a picture of Washington versus a picture of Obama. It needs to understand those unique differences in each of those images, or each of those features. Now, another way to think about this, and this image classification pipeline at a high level, is in terms of features that are characteristics of a particular class. Classification is done by detecting these types of features in the class. If you detect enough of these features specific to that class, then you can probably say with pretty high confidence that you're looking at that class. Now, one way to solve this problem is to leverage knowledge about your field, some domain knowledge, and say, let's suppose we're dealing with human faces. We can use our knowledge about human faces to say that if we want to detect human faces, we can first detect noses, eyes, ears, mouths, and then once we have a detection pipeline for those, we can start to detect those features and then determine if we're looking at a human face or not. Now, there's a big problem with that approach, and that's that preliminary detection pipeline. How do we detect those noses, ears, mouths? And like this hierarchy is kind of our bottleneck in that sense. And remember that these images are just three-dimensional arrays of numbers. Well, actually, they're just three-dimensional arrays of brightness values, and that images can hold tons of variation. So there's variations such as occlusions that we have to deal with, variations in illumination, and even interclass variation. And when we're building our classification pipeline, we need to be invariant to all of these variations and be sensitive to interclass variation. So sensitive to the variations between classes, but invariant to the variations within a single class. Now, even though our pipeline could use the features that we, as humans, defined, the manual extraction of those features is where this really breaks down. Now, due to the incredible variability in image data specifically, the detection of these features is super difficult in practice, and manually extracting these features can be extremely brittle. So how can we do better than this? That's really the question that we want to tackle today. One way is that we want to extract both these visual features and detect their presence in the image simultaneously and in a hierarchical fashion. And for that, we can use neural networks like we saw in class number 1 and 2. And our approach here is going to be to learn the visual features directly from data and to learn hierarchy of these features so that we can reconstruct a representation of what makes up our final class label. So I think now that we have that foundation of how images work, we can actually move on to asking ourselves how we can learn those visual features, specifically with a certain type of operation in neural networks. And neural networks will allow us to directly learn those features from visual data if we construct them cleverly and correctly. In lecture 1, we learned about fully connected or dense neural networks, where you can have multiple hidden layers, and each hidden layer is densely connected to its previous layer. And densely connected here, let me just remind you, is that every input is connected to every output in that layer. So let's say that we want to use these densely connected networks in image classification. What that would mean is that we're going to take our two-dimensional image, right? It's a two-dimensional spatial structure. We're going to collapse it down into a one-dimensional vector, and then we can feed that through our dense network. So now every pixel in that one-dimensional vector will feed into the next layer. And you can already imagine that, or you should already appreciate that all of our two-dimensional structure in that image is completely gone already, because we've collapsed that two-dimensional image into one dimension. We've lost all of that very useful spatial structure in our image, and all of that domain knowledge that we could have used a priori. And additionally, we're going to have a